That's a smart woman over there.
All right, you got 7:03 and you are live.
Great, thanks, Carrie. I'd like to welcome everyone to the regular meeting of the Housing Commission, City of Oneonta, March 2nd, 2022, 7 p.m. Carrie, please call the roll.
Chairman,
Here.
Commissioner Vacancy. Here. Commissioner Fox. Here. Commissioner Friedman.
Here.
Commissioner Shu.
Here.
Commissioner Lestressa. Commissioner Armstrong. Here. Councilmember Hammond.
Here.
Thank you. We had a request from the mayor to address the commission, and we'd like to move to that right now, if you don't mind, Mayor.
Not at all, thank you. Chair May, first of all, I want to welcome Jen Armstrong to this group. I think you will all enjoy working with her, and I know that you have been now, I think it's 5 meetings that you've had. Very close to that, if not exactly. I want to provide some direction, and hopefully that will help this group gain some traction. So first, let me say that there is no more important body, in my estimation, Economic Development Committee, any other committee that you can think of that is hugely important, is not as important as this group and what this group winds up doing over the course of this next year. You've heard me, I expect at this point, talk about, and I've been told to stop. Nonetheless, I continue to say it is our goal. I think it's important to have a goal that we can all buy into the value of bringing 1,000 people into our community that are either employed coming up here or are coming up here for jobs that are well paid. If we do that, it will have a transformative effect on Oneonta. It'll change the dynamic of our downtown, of our businesses, east, west, north, and south of our downtown. It will change our tax slice individually. It will be transformative to Oneonta, and we are going to get there. There is a very good likelihood in the next year that we may see a significant number of well-paying jobs coming into the community. More on that some other time. If we begin to advertise these well-paying jobs and we don't have a place for people to come and live, they will wind up cannibalizing other companies. And instead of being a positive for us, it'll be a net negative for us. We absolutely need to have a place for people who have means or the expectation of a good job to live. So market rate housing. That's the priority. Now we can chew gum and walk at the same time. And we will. Affordable housing is incredibly important. Having a place for someone who has been marginalized, either economically or in any other fashion, and find themselves unable to live in a place where they have the respect of the landlord, is not an appropriate option. We need to be able to provide people a place to live. We have a refugee concern in the world. We're all watching what's happening in Ukraine right now, but in Ukraine right now. And there are any number of folks that are seeking asylum essentially in other countries that may come to us. But we have a refugee problem that is going to continue to grow with climate change, with every other instance of political turmoil that seems to be more prevalent than not these days. There are going to be people looking for a place to live, and we are a welcoming community. And so we need to address that problem as well. So we need, you could say it's a three-legged stool, but I would say it's a chair. The front two legs have to be market rate housing. And affordable housing and taking care of our potential refugee accommodation is the fourth leg of that chair. What you guys do here, if you can have that, please, be your focus. And as Ed, as you start to recreate the direction, I even see it here within the context of your agenda, in terms of commission structure and charges of that commission. If we can do that, if we can make that our priority while walking and chewing gum, I think that the work that you do here will wind up being as important as anything that's been done or will be done in this next year and change. So thank you all for your service, and any way that I can be of assistance, I am at your disposal. Call me anytime, text me anytime, email me anytime. I'll be responsive and I'll be advocate. That's all.
Right. Thanks, Mayor. Karen, let's go with the presentation next.
Kathy, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready, you all. Should I go ahead and share my screen?
Yes, please.
Okay. Okay. So first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to speak with you all. My name is Kathy Delasi. I work at the center in Utica, which is the name of what was the Refugee Resettlement Center. And my hat is that I'm the Immigrant Community Navigator for the Office for New Americans. Can you all see my whole screen?
Yes.
You guys are all set? Okay. So I'll just, you all just shout out any questions, or if you need, if something happens with the technology, make sure you rein me in and let me know what's happening. So, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much for inviting me today, and the rest of the commission. I really appreciate it. As you may know, there's a big group of people in Oneonta who are very interested in developing a mechanism for accepting refugees, possibly as a satellite to our operation in Utica. And so we've been talking about that. There's this group is great. We have quite a bit of research already done, but one of the sticking points, as the mayor pointed out, is housing. And so I wanted to tell you a little bit about what that means for refugee resettlement purposes, and then let you all think about solutions. But so I'll just go ahead and get started. I just wanted to let you know a little bit about the terminology that we use, because it's not immediately apparent to everybody, including myself, before I was working in the business, what these different terms mean. So for the purposes of this presentation, we'll talk about two things. We'll talk about refugee resettlement, which is what we traditionally do with people from all over the world every year. We have people from Sudan or Somalia or Bosnia in the past, or Ukraine under normal circumstances, or people from all over the world who come into the United States as refugees. And then we have another special situation that started just this past August, which is the Afghan Placement and Assistance Program. You'll see it referred to as APA very frequently in news reports and also in my presentation. So let's talk for a minute about who a refugee really is, because there can be confusion for people about the difference between a refugee and an immigrant, and a refugee and an undocumented immigrant. And those are very different things. A refugee is a legal word, and it is someone who is located outside of the United States. When they start the process of being designated a refugee, they request that from outside of the United States. You cannot request to be a refugee once you're here. So they're outside of the US. This is a person who is of special humanitarian concern to the United States because they demonstrate that they were persecuted or feared persecution due to race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group. And so these people have particular stories that make them vulnerable in their societies. Okay, sometimes that is because of a war. Sometimes that is because of a sexual orientation. Sometimes there is we have cases of genocide, of course, which are internal to a country, and people apply to be refugees as a result of that. So these are people with stories of being persecuted in their country of origin. They go to another country and they request from the United Nations High Commission for Refugees to be refugees. There's a long process of paperwork that goes into being designated a refugee, at which point you can then finally be resettled. Most of them are resettled, I mean, depending on where they are in the world, they're resettled into a welcoming country that is closest. So a lot of people are resettled in Europe, and of course, some people are resettled into the United States, okay? These are people who are otherwise admissible to the United States. They are given strict background checks. So they're run through the ringer of tests and interviews in order to determine that they will be acceptable for entrance into the United States, okay? So that's what a refugee is. Now, the APA program is a program that was designated special for the Afghans, and in particular because of this extremely urgent situation that happened last summer. So you'll see on this slide that the word parole is used. This is not parole like in the penal system. This is parole that simply, the word is used to mean a designation of allowing them to relocate in our system. So you'll hear that word used. Humanitarian parolees are people who are admitted to the United States as with a temporary status. That's what the parole refers to. Okay, so it's similar to the penal system, but I mean, it has nothing to do with them having committed any crimes or any of that. It's just a similar use of the word. And so for the APAs, they are allowed to rebuild their lives in the United States, and local refugee resettlement agencies like ourselves, and in some cases, community partners are the people who help them to do that. There's a little bit more on the next slide about what they are. So of the Afghans who are eligible for special immigrant visas, okay, which is yet another designation, it's because they personally took significant risk to support our military or civilian personnel in Afghanistan. So these are the typical ones that you read about. These are the interpreters, the guides, or the people that were working directly with international or US forces in Afghanistan, and their families. So the person who applies for the special immigrant visa is the person who was working, say the translator, Mohammed, who was working with the forces. He applies for a special immigrant visa, and then his family can apply after he is accepted, okay? Now, the APA designation covers special immigrant visas and people who are not able to apply for those, but who are still vulnerable under the Taliban regime. So that would include journalists, human rights activists, humanitarian workers, women who are judges, for example. There are a lot of people who could be at risk, and we will continue to see people, hopefully, who are able to get out of Afghanistan and come to a safer environment for them. And then their family members, very frequently of American citizens or lawfully permanent residents. So those are people who have moved to the United States lawfully. Okay, is everything okay so far, guys?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, okay. So those are some of the definitions. And I just wanted to give you a little bit of a snapshot of the experience that Utica has had. So we have resettled about 16,500 refugees. I say about because that number obviously has changed in the past couple of months, upward by about 150. So we've resettled 16,500 refugees since 1981. Utica, a lot of you are going to know more about Utica than I do, because although I am from Madison County, I was not as familiar with Utica until I started working here. But apparently it went through a pretty dire situation in the 1980s and 1990s, from what people tell me. And we even had the National Guard come in and had to tear down houses. I mean, it was a mess. And so as a result of various waves of refugees, the most significant number of which were Bosnians in the 1990s, that population decline and the sort of decline of the city, decaying of the city, was stopped by the early 2000s. To the point that right now, when polled, 69% of Utica residents actually believe that immigration is good for the area, and they're from all over the political spectrum. So to get a little bit into the housing, so I spoke with a few landlords in preparation for meeting with you all, because I wanted to be able to tell you anecdotally what our landlords say. And so one person said, you know, immigration has been a blessing and has saved neighborhoods. One person pointed out, refugees do not give you problems precisely because they are trying to become citizens. Any legal action taken against them can put in jeopardy their whole life in the United States. Especially a felony, but I mean any sort of legal situation. And so these are people who keep their heads down and work hard. And they're just trying to make a go of it. They've come in many cases from very difficult situations, and all that they want is to be given a chance to work for their families and make a go of it. And Keith Rayner, who's one of our, whose name I misspelled, please don't tell him. Keith Rayner, who is one of our landlords who's consistently worked with us for 35 years and has held, at different times, he's held as few as 20 or as many as 60 properties. And he has never had to take a refugee to court, ever, for any problem. So that gives you an idea. You know, it can be hard to see, you know, to not know much about the people who are going to occupy the housing, your house. If you're renting out a house of your own, I can totally understand how it would be a little bit daunting to have people come from a different country who you can't really communicate very well with. And so that's where I wanted to tell you a little bit more about the support that refugee resettlement agencies and any satellite agency in Oneonta would be expected to provide the same kind of support for the refugees with landlords, which ends up being support for the landlords, of course. So frequently the refugee resettlement groups co-sign, so they do absorb, not all the time, but we do sometimes absorb legally some of the risk for the apartments. We do pay the first month's rent and the security deposit. Usually we end up paying 30 to 90 days of rent as is needed by the family, because it's going to take them, I mean, the 30 days, definitely. Really, the only people who get jobs within 90 days are the ones who already have English skills. But then very quickly after that, it's surprising how quickly people do find jobs that they can, you know, contribute to, even with very rudimentary English skills. So the resettlement agency does help with the cost of the housing. We also support very strongly, like on a daily basis in a lot of cases, the family to understand what the norms are of living in a house in the United States, like not building a fire in the middle of the living room to cook your dinner. Believe it or not, these are things that, you know, we have to tell people about to keep them safe and to keep your apartment safe, right? And so our resettlement team has a, a training that we do with families, how to use the stove, what to do if you blow a fuse. I mean, any of the things that you think about that are involved in existing in a house. And very often we have to teach people. I mean, many of our Burmese people, who we have a large population of Burmese, they're coming from camps, and some of them were born in a camp. And so they've actually never had exposure to even just the most normal things for us, like a gas stove. So, we train people, and people are smart. They don't want to burn down where they live. So they learn pretty quickly. And then the other good thing from a landlord's point of view is that we are working very hard to get these people into jobs. It is one of our mandates, from the state, is to help people to find a way to earn a living, to contribute to the society in which they live. And so these people are going to have all of our support behind them to find those jobs. So that's the kind of support that you can expect. I want to pause here and ask if there are any questions so far, or any comments.
Nope, I think they're good.
Everybody's okay? Okay. So what I'm happy to do with you is of course send you this presentation afterwards, just that you have it. But to give you an idea of some of the questions, of course, that we ask of the landlords. What's the maximum occupancy? What's the cost of the security deposit? What are the utilities if they're not included in the rent? What do they typically run? I mean, these are questions that everybody asks, no? The terms for the return of the security deposit, the cosigner, whether the cosigner can be removed from the lease after a certain period of time, process for early termination of the lease, and penalties, possibility of short-term lease or month-to-month option. I would say that the more expensive the apartment, the more likely people are going to need a short-term lease. Because once they're on their own, they're probably not going to be earning a lot of money at the start, right? And this varies enormously from population to population. Mr. Mayor, I know we were talking one time on one of our Oneonta meetings. You don't know who you're going to get when you're in the refugee resettlement business. 2 weeks ago, we wouldn't have thought that there would be a lot of Ukrainians. Now there are going to be a lot of Ukrainians, and Ukrainians are Europeans. Many of them are going to speak English. A lot of them are going to have advanced degrees. And these are people who are going to be able to be placed very quickly into very good jobs, versus the example that I just gave a few minutes ago of the person who grew up in a camp in Thailand, actually, outside of Burma. Those are vastly different people to try to help. And so the Ukrainian example is going to be somebody who is really not going to take a lot of work from us, and is probably going to incorporate very easily into life in whatever city they arrive at. So that just gives you an idea of how quickly things can change. And the Afghans fall somewhere in the middle. There's a guy the other day who I was like, oh my gosh, he should be our boss. Because he's so well prepared, and he worked with the World Bank and the UN in Kabul, and he speaks 5 languages, and we were all just like, oh dear, we've got to find this guy a great job. And then we have a couple of people from Khost, which is a region of Afghanistan where they were helping protect our forces, where the only skill they have is being soldiers. Which is not going to be easy for them, and they don't speak English. So that just gives you an idea of that you really don't know. When you set yourself up to receive refugees, you receive the ones that come. And you have to be prepared to do that. So yeah, getting into the basic housing needs. This is just like a kind of summary. You need decent, safe, and sanitary housing. It has to be affordable in the sense that we want the clients to be able to stay when possible. Again, the month-to-month thing can be helpful. But when possible, it's nice for them to get settled in and have their kids, know how to get back and forth from school, and then have them stay there for a year or two until they can afford a more expensive place. And of course, a lot of people don't have, almost no one has a driver's license that is acceptable for use in the US when they first arrive. And so they will have to take public transportation or walk. There's nothing wrong with them walking to school or to shopping and such. But we do have to keep in mind that they're going to be in the process of getting their driver's licenses, but they will not have one when they arrive. And some of them won't be able to drive, by the way. So they will have that'll be a slightly longer process, we hope. Some characteristics of the housing. This should be anything that you would have for, a couple starting out in the US, for example. People who might not have a lot of money, but need the basics. They need a stove with an oven, they need a fridge, a sink, a toilet, shower or bath in decent repair. They need someplace to take their garbage, preferably someplace with storage, although in all fairness, people don't tend to come with a lot of stuff, but it's on the list of things that we should be able to give to them. We do sometimes get refugees with disabilities. Not very often, I have to say. It's not, it's not super common. But we will occasionally get a refugee with a disability, a physical disability, I mean, in which case we do need to make sure that they have housing that's safe for them and that they can get around in. Evidently, free of rodent and insect infestation, free of visible health and safety hazards. I mean, these are things that they require us to kind of convey to you, but it's sort of common sense. As you know, we had, lead problems in a lot of our houses. I don't know whether you have the same problem in Oneonta, but, we do have to be careful about the paint, flaking or peeling paint in some of these old homes. And then this is a kind of a busy slide that under the circumstances, even though I prepared it for you all, I think it's probably easier if you read it after we talk today, just because it's the details of what each apartment should have. So, we have a checklist, just to give you the idea of how it works. You can read it later, but we have a checklist of what every apartment needs to have, so that every family feels like they have the same as other families. Now, obviously, you can't make one apartment be exactly the same as the other apartment. We're not expected to do that, but each person should feel like another family is not getting a spectacular place and they're getting a really bad place. And so, we try to have kind of the one lamp per room, the equivalent seating to one couch for everybody can sit down in the family at the same time. Kitchen table, one chair per person, so you get the point, I think. We do get a lot of donations, which we cannot actually even absorb. It's surprising to people, but places like IKEA have made getting furniture so much easier, that is clean, simple, doesn't need to be, fixed in any way other than put together. Having put together my own IKEA shelves, yikes. But, what Javad was telling me, who's our director of resettlement, he said, I haven't bought furniture. We haven't used donated furniture for years, because it's become so much more economical to just buy it. And when you buy it, you know exactly what each family is getting. So I thought that was interesting. That was interesting to me. I assumed that we did it through donations. So sometimes you have to be, careful as well when you ask the community for donations, be specific about what you want. And I noticed when we were asking the community for donations in the fall, basically refugee resettlement was saying, just please gift cards. Because that way a family can go and maybe they already have winter coats, but what they need are button-down shirts for interviews. Or, you know, they have boots, but what they need are socks. I mean, each family comes with a little bit what they could pick up and put into a bag when they left wherever they were. So this is a list of what has to be in the apartment. And, you know, it's pretty easy to understand. Now, suggestions for places where housing is scarce. Sometimes what we've done and what we will be doing as well in the future is there are some hotels that have those apartments with small kitchens, right? We sometimes have to put people up in those. We can negotiate rates sometimes with those hotels to have people there for several weeks, even while we get them straightened out for a house. Their Airbnb currently has a special relationship with the Department of State for the Afghans. And we need to get in touch with each Airbnb designated sort of management of our area to find out what that deal is. But basically, it means that an Airbnb could be used for the Afghans. The owner wouldn't lose money because Airbnb would, our understanding that Airbnb would reimburse them. We have not used that yet in Utica. And then another option, which is not ideal, but can work for a short period of time, is to have a separate living space in a private home. Preferably with a separate entrance. And the only reason we say that these aren't great solutions is that the whole point of getting these people into a safe, stable environment is for them to be in a place where they can stay and where they can be themselves and where they can cook their food and where they don't feel like they're in someone else's space and uncomfortable. And, you know, I mean, we want them to be able to move forward. So these are temporary suggestions or temporary solutions, but not permanent solutions. And that pretty much brings us to the end of it. I'm sure you all have some questions, so please let me know what they are.
Kathy, I have a question.
Sure.
Currently, as I understand it, there's the Utica model, which I think you were presenting here, where Oneonta would have something of a symbiotic relationship with the Utica effort. There's also something called a sponsor circle that is a concurrent program that's a little bit more sped up, a little bit more expedited, that requires 5 community members essentially to take responsibility, and $2,400 approximately per individual that winds up being mirrored by federal funds. I guess the big point for me is that there is an expectation of something along the lines of a 6-month lease as being the minimum as someone comes into the housing part of that program, as they have been dislocated and relocated and dislocated and relocated, and they for the sense of their own stability. That's something that was imparted to me as being more of a priority. This is a concurrent program to the program that Utica is offering, and it's, as I said, a little bit more expeditious, a little bit more sped up.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that just a little bit, please?
Sure. So the Sponsor Circles is a program that, as you say, is a response to the Afghan crisis. And it's a situation in which a group of normal people, civilian citizens, gets together. There's a website in which there's an application. Each person has to fill out part of that application. One person has to do training. As you say, they have to raise money. It's about I think it's $2,275 per refugee. So if you had a family of 5, multiply that by 5. It's not per family. And those are indeed, that's what I talked about that recently because I went to a training for it, for the sponsor circles, because I thought that might be an interesting way for you guys to kind of get started. Throw yourselves in at the deep end, but not with 50 families, with 1 or 2. And so I still think it's a good idea. Some of the people in the community seem to be enthusiastic about it, but okay, so going back to what it actually means, the sponsor circles, and if you guys want to be patient with me for a second, I can actually bring up a presentation that they gave. Hold on a second. Sponsor circles, there it is. Okay. Structure and roles. Oh dear. Well, this is probably going to be too small for you all to see very well. Can you see it on my screen?
Yes.
You can. Okay, great. So this is a just one pager on what the sponsor circle is made up of. So you have a coordinator. They would work with us. So each sponsor circle has to work with a resettlement agency that can guide them on how to do each of these things. Sometimes it really just involves going and standing in line at the Social Security office, right? But we know when to do that, how to do that, and what paperwork you need to do that, right? So each sponsor circle is designated a resettlement agency to work with. Again, they have to help people complete the necessary paperwork, including address forms, selective service registrations. I don't know who does the check, but they're given a 30 and 90-day checks. That's not check with money, it's to check on them. The sponsor circle has to connect the refugee family to free or affordable legal assistance and follow up with them to make sure that they're getting everything done in time, getting their kids enrolled in school, getting themselves looking for a job, from getting their utilities hooked up until all of the things I just mentioned. They do have to have medical checks when they first arrive, including psychological checks. And please keep in mind that these are people, I would say the majority of people who come in as refugees are suffering from some form of PTSD. It's the nature of what has happened to them. And so, although the vast majority of people somehow seem to push through it and come out the other side working and functioning and being okay, we do want to be sensitive to the fact that they could need support for mental health. Okay, and so what they've done here is shown you, if you wanted to have a sponsor circle, these are the groups that you should think about breaking your group of people down into to organize your sponsor circle. So when I did the training, there were several different communities. One was a pastor in Oregon, and he had like a church with maybe 200 members, and they were all going to break down into these different teams to help their families that they were hoping to receive. Questions? I thought I heard somebody.
I have a question off the subject. You're done with it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Did you have many vacant apartments in Utica when you started this?
Can you just repeat that? Do we have what?
Did you have many vacant apartments in Utica when you started this?
Yes. So apparently, when they started the process in the 80s, Utica was declining in population. And so they had vacant apartments. The problem was they were in really bad shape. And Javad was telling me that at some point, and I don't have the dates for it, I was actually trying to find that out and I never did get the dates, but the city ran a program at some point where where properties were auctioned for $1 if the person committed to fixing up the property and making it into a place where you could rent it out. I don't know how they did that legally. I don't know any of the details of it. It's just that our resettlement director mentioned that to me as something that city did to refurbish as a, at the same time as accepting new people, they could refurbish some of their old properties that were making the city look really dodgy.
Thank you.
More questions?
It looks like not.
Okay. So I can send you guys the presentation and I can send you, should I send through Carrie to all of you guys, the housing presentation and the sponsor circle information? Would you like both?
That would be great.
Okay,
Can I ask
happy to
you one
do that.
question before she does? Can I ask you a question? So are there any other satellite communities interested in doing this resettlement of refugees in upstate or central New York, like Little Falls, or, communities similar in size to Oneonta that have?
Yeah, it is a good question. And we don't actually know. The only thing we do know is that Binghamton has wanted to, and I think is going to do their own sponsor circle, group in Binghamton, and in Ithaca as well. So Southern Tier, there appears to be interest. There is refugee resettlement already. There are agencies in Buffalo, Syracuse, Albany, us, and downstate. And so we'd have to reach out to those executive directors to know whether they've had interest from communities in their areas. But I only know of the Southern Tier interest. But I mean, that's pretty close to you guys, no? I mean, not super far.
It's about the same as Utica is from here.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay.
Or so miles, yeah.
Right. So, I mean, it would be great if you all could think about the sponsor circle situation once you see what I'm going to send over to you in the website, and see if that's something that you think could work. And then I guess you would just need somebody to take the lead on it, and really be the coordinator of it. For the longer term refugee resettlement satellite, that's something that we are still, we're working on up here as well, in terms of how that works. I know that there was an attempt made several years ago to have a similar situation just with the city of Rome right here, our neighbor, and it didn't work out. So, there's no guarantee. You can't control people's movements, and that is another thing that I did want to bring up. You can welcome people and try to make their lives pleasant and productive, but they can still move. We have plenty of people who come into Utica and end up moving. Maybe they have a family member in San Francisco that they end up going to, or in Michigan, or in Alabama. Maybe they end up not liking the weather, and so the hardest is at the beginning, because people are naturally going to be want to be where there are other people from a similar background. And so I know that people get disappointed when families might leave their area, but we just have to accept it. Sometimes we'll do a lot for people and help them as much as we can and feel like we've done so much, but they still have the freedom to go someplace else if they want to, right?
Are you available for any of us that might want to drive up to Utica and see what you've done?
Yeah, we'd love to welcome you to Utica. I will say that Right now, we have, sadly, our property is, we're all working from home because our property has mold remediation happening. We had a flood, we had a pipe burst and a flood at our offices, and there was dilly-dallying by the insurance company long enough that mold built up. And so now we don't have access to our office. So as soon as that is done, I would love for you all to come up. It should be a couple of weeks, maybe 3 weeks. I would love for you all to come up and we could show you the different programs that we have. You know, we could make a day of it. Have you, interact with different people that are here. Have you talked to some of our families, and we'd love that.
Great. Well, thank you very much for the presentation.
Great. Thank you for the invitation. Okay, so you'll let me know if you have any questions, and I'll send all this information to you after, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye. Now I have to just try to figure out how to get out of here. Please. There we go. Okay, bye, everybody.
Mark, I have a question for you.
Sure.
You seem to be prioritizing market rate housing.
Yes.
This is not market rate housing.
No, but this is important, as is affordable housing. So we can prioritize something and also give due diligence to ensuring that these other issues move along at an appropriate pace.
Can I just make a comment about this? So there's a movie called Utica, The Last Refuge, and a professor at Hartwick put it on one night in January for his class, and it was in the newspaper, and I bundled up and went up there, and contextualizes what they're doing in Utica, puts, real breath and energy into, this was really dry. So I don't know if we could get a hold of that movie and, show, but one of the things it pointed out is the money that they invested came back over time, and they were, the refugees became productive members of the community, paying taxes and becoming, integrated into the community. And, it was really a feel-good movie. I mean, the different refugees all formed their own soccer teams and competed in the city parks, and the part about also that I think that fear of having refugees here as being kind of troublemakers, problems. What she said is true, that they're really not interested in getting in trouble, as they do want to pursue citizenship, and the trouble they get into is from basically not understanding some of the rules of the game, from being kind of newbies and not, paying getting to be able to pay their bills or their responsibilities and all that kind of stuff. So just put it out there. I mean, if we get a hold of that movie, it really, gives you a really nice picture of what's really going on. And,
I think it's Professor Wolf at Hartwick College.
So,
Carrie's gonna see if she can run that down for us.
On their website, I've got their
Right.
trailer, but I'm trying to get the video.
But we can get the whole thing. And look at it. I think it's important that we pay attention to this, but as Peter said, it's not the panacea.
right.
I got involved with a group down in Binghamton that does this and went through huge naturalization, I mean, it was amazing when these big folks actually go to court and become citizens.
Yeah, it's a big thing.
And, I mean, it was a good feeling for me, who knew nobody in the room. I met them in the morning and went to court with them in the afternoon. So it's, again, back to the mayor's comment about, it's still with four legs. But the front two legs have to be market rate housing.
Sure, absolutely,
We're gonna
yeah.
bring things to sustain our community going forward.
Absolutely.
So I think we can walk and talk and, review them all. But we have to focus on housing for affordable housing for people at market rates. Carrie, is there any correspondence?
There's none.
Okay. I would look for an approval of the minutes of our February 2nd meeting. Would you like to make that motion? Approved by Jared. Is there any comments, corrections, additions, deletions? No comments? Hearing none, we can move to approve by acclamation. Old business, housing study recommendations review. Has everyone had a chance to read this draft? I would like for each of us to read it again and look at it in light of the redirection of our mission here. Because I don't think this fairly reflects what this housing commission was formed to do. To aid in that, I've asked the clerk to send 2 reports that were done a while ago to each of us. One of them is the fiscal implications of the property tax in the city of Oneonta, where we do have significant tax exempt properties. 47% of the taxpayers here pay 100% of the tax load. We have to be aware of that. So there's the original report, and there was an update. These were done in 12, 10 years old. You might find the information relevant today. Not much has changed. And once we read that, we'll have a chance to talk about it. If folks want to get together in a workshop session in between these meetings, we can make that happen as well, so we can review these things and see what we can do. Anybody have any thoughts? Yeah. Peter?
I didn't know those studies existed,
Right.
and so I think it's a good opportunity for us to read them and then discuss them.
Yes, ma'am.
And I like the idea of a workshop in between, very much.
Well, knowing these studies around, one of the benefits, I guess, of being old. You were involved in doing a lot of these, and I just thought they were germane to what we're trying to accomplish. Or any comments from your end? Trying to get around the whole world. Peter? Any suggestions on what we might do better?
With regard to the properties of the tax rule.
Well, that might be a start, something we could work through, and I think we've made some suggestions in the past, and you and I know have made. But as a commission, we could make them again and see if we can get the council to move on. I mean, as you know, we've made and there's a pretty good list here of some of the suggestions that have been made that have not really been acted on by the council. They've been put on the shelf, and very few things have been done. There's an excuse that the city can't do it, but there's a lot of things they can't. A lot of things they can promote. And we need to be specific with it again, and hopefully Mayor Drennick here will follow through with that and get the council behind it. And that's what's been missing before. I mean, the last time we got something done in the housing arena, I think, was the 485 exemptions for some property taxes for people that did substantial renovation with their property under Mayor Miller. Sir?
So that's well.
Well, it was. It's quite a while ago since you've really done something substantial. And it will change our focus a little bit if we're looking at market rate housing as opposed to supported housing.
So I'd like to change the subject just a little. I think that the progress that we've made over the past 10, 15 years is that we we've got the Newman project developed, the D Street project developed, and the Clinton Street project developed. They were all done because somebody championed those projects. Somebody found a developer and championed those projects. I think we should focus on which few projects we can envision and see who's going to champion, because otherwise we're not going to make any progress, I think. So I think we need to build housing, and I think the way to do that is to find somebody who wants to build it, that they can make some money doing it, and provide them with the places to do it by making them for sale through pressure, or through selling them ourselves if the city or the school district owns them.
Sure.
But I think we need to do things quickly, because Mark so far has a 4-year term. And 1,000 people is a lot of people in 4 years. So I think we need to start building soon. Also,
Right.
I get tired of talking about things that don't seem to produce anything, so. I don't want to get too much tired than I already am. More tired.
Well, you know, some of this stuff, you know, here is gonna require some input from city staff. Like, we've identified 99 parcels of land that the city of Oneonta owns. And we've asked city staff to go through and let's identify those parcels. Let's see which ones the city has a need for, which ones are just surplus and they own because they own them and they don't know why they own them. I mean, some of them are as big as 20 acres.
Right,
Let's see what we can do about getting them back on the market.
but some of them are useless slivers of land, so we need to focus on just
No
the
question.
parcels that are developable.
Yes, sir. But at the same time, we can look at the useless slivers of land and reach out to the property owners adjacent to them and see if they'll take those useless slivers of land and put them back on the tax rolls.
Well, that's fine, but I think our goal should not be getting things on the tax rolls as much as getting housing built. I think that's our function, our purpose.
I'll agree with that, but they're sort of one and the same.
Now, we need another committee for that.
Well, we have actually, we've got the finance committees on that. And that
So I think it starts with an inventory of vacant land that's buildable. And I actually started putting that together. The county has a wonderful GIS service. What I haven't done is put it in a shareable format yet. And I could use some help from either an intern or anyone who's willing to help. Because what we need is a map that shows where they are. And we need to look at the overlays. What are they buildable in terms of flood?
In terms of flood,
And or hillside. And then you need to identify the property owner and the property owner's address.
Wouldn't that be the city?
What do you mean?
Vacant city land?
No, she's talking
No,
about
I'm
any
talking
vacant land
about it.
in the city.
Right, I
Make it
looked at,
buildable.
right, I looked at vacant parcels, 1 acre or more in the city of Oneonta.
I did a survey myself today throughout the whole city. And of course, lots of things come back to my memory, so it's kind of easy for me. And there are several vacant parcels of land that are privately owned, and not that many large parcels that are city owned. But I believe that when we redid the zoning code in 2011, we made an effort to zone almost all of those parcels for multiple dwelling housing. I was very surprised that we did that. I completely forgot that we had done that. But
Surprised in a positive way.
it's surprised in a positive way, because that barrier doesn't exist any longer, which would have been a major barrier. And the only reason we were able to do that in 2011 is because we did the whole city all at once. So I would like to, I asked Greg for a tax map so I can put those parcels on the tax map, but maybe I can share that with you once I get that.
I mean, this is the first stab at identifying the city-owned properties. And we can do a similar thing with the privately owned properties. It's supposed to come up on screen so you can see.
Well, what are you doing? Oh, you're looking at the tax map, at that map.
That is the tax map, and the yellows are the city-owned properties that they have no particular use for. And frankly, didn't really even know we own.
Did we look at this before?
Yeah. On paper, I think Steve showed us this on paper.
Right. We can take that same map and with a different color, identify the privately owned properties. You were speaking of.
And there are significantly more.
Yes, ma'am.
To John and Pete, approximately how many properties have you identified to date?
Just, I did this last week, so I would say probably in the range of 40.
41 acre or bigger parcels that are available in the city of Oneonta?
That are vacant.
Vacant parcels.
That's amazing. Peter?
Yeah, I don't see that many, but unless we change the zones and the city or the school district sells them. Some of them are pretty big. But I think to get some of these lands available for sale and for development, we should be looking at the tax structure for vacant land. Because it shouldn't be so easy to just continue to own vacant land forever.
Something for a workshop, Peter.
The only way to address that is to raise the taxes on it.
Yes, ma'am.
So I think it's possible, John, if you have those tax map IDs and you can query that off the county GIS and give it to our city staff. I believe we rehired a GIS tech. So you just give those, and they'll be able to overlay it into this format. And Peter, you can do the same.
Yeah.
And if we just use different colors for your findings, that would be great. I want to thank you very much for finding that. That was one of my pet projects, was finding the 90+ vacant site. Thank you both for doing that.
But I think we should broaden the scope of what we want to target for first housing. How about not getting too far off of the track we're going on? Target the scope of what we want to be looking at right away to include vacant and underutilized buildings. All of which we have more weaponry to lower the price than we do for vacant land, unless we change the tax rate for vacant land. Because most of those vacant buildings need a lot of work, and they're in violation now. And Steve, you don't have to comment on this, but I know that Steve doesn't have the amount of staff he needs to attack all of the properties in the city that are substandard. And he needs that staff. And without that, we're fighting a losing battle.
I mean, I'll just comment on that. We actually tore a house down in the city going out, so the bank just paid us to tear down.
Yeah.
That's how much they don't really care about those properties. So the odds of you being able to find someone who will then sell that property, I mean, it's a nightmare. Like, you have layers of banks, layers of property management companies, holding companies.
Right.
We'll send them a bill for 10 grand a year and just cut us a check.
You're talking about, I think, vacant homes, which I think is different from the bigger vacant buildings that we have, like the Armory and St. Mary's.
Well, so those, I mean, the problem with like the Armory is like, we have, the city owns it and we can't convert it to housing in its current existence.
The legal framework.
The legal framework.
You have deed restrictions on
There's
that.
deed restrictions on that property that
Yes.
prevent us from.
But we knew at least 10 years ago that we might want to build housing, and we should have been working on it. I don't want to say we should have, but
I
we
would
should have
recommend
been
you talk to
working.
Dave Mercer about that. I would recommend you talk to Dave Mercer.
Yeah, I mean, it's not up to Dave Mercer to decide to do it. It's up to the town council to direct attorneys to start to do this kind of thing. And whether it's Dave Mercer or a younger guy with more energy, I don't know. I think we need to move ahead with all of these these buildings and parcels. If there's legal changes that are required, and I think we should look at some of the city parking as well.
Right, it all should be on the table.
Yeah.
And that was, you know, it was nice from my perspective that Mark wanted to come tonight to refocus us on what we're doing. I got a little, I'm not gonna make a long speech about this, but got a little discouraged initially when Mayor Herzig asked me to serve on this commission. And I sat here for the first night and we talked about market rate housing for about 10 minutes. And then it broke down into what we can get for grant supported low income housing in our community. And we have a substantial amount of that right now.
Well,
And we built a lot of it over the years.
yeah, the value judgment that you place on that by saying it broke down and what sort we talked about, we need lower income housing.
We do. We need a broad spectrum of housing.
Yeah, and so if Mark is saying we need market rate housing, first, let's start working on that, but let's do what we have to,
Right, and
as he
it's,
said.
and it's not even first, it's concurrent. It's just,
You can do both, as you said, you can walk and chew gum at the same time. But when this report comes around, read it, dive into this stuff that's there, because there's a lot of technical things there, a lot of tables in there, and they show how a community might support itself. I mean, you look around our community and see how many private businesses we have. How many major employers we have here in the city, and then even surrounding the city. And you'll see how much it's dropped off in the last 10 and 20 years. They're gone.
Yeah.
So we have to find some way to support our goals and desires.
Yeah.
And when you have a system in a city where 47% of the population pays 100% of the tax, you've got a problem. It's been constantly dropping for 50 years. The people that are paying are less and less every year.
I agree with you. I think it's a major problem for us that may be an impossible hurdle, but I don't really think that we can do anything about state law as a committee here. I mean, council perhaps can petition the state for relief from all of the exemptions, but I don't see it happening in my lifetime.
I think our goal here in jobs should be to point these things out. And so they have a checklist of things to go after and look at and see what is doable and what is not.
Yeah.
I started out thinking that everything is doable. I mean, I like the idea of immigrants and refugees. I mean, that's appealing to me on many levels. But then we have to think about how we're going to support it. If it's $25 per head per family and there's 5 people in a family, we've got to come up with 12 grand. Every time we want to have a family come to our community, where is that 12 grand coming from? Those are the kind of questions we have to ask, and they're not easy questions, and they're not always popular questions, but they need to be asked and answered. That's the reason I asked Kathy, hey, would you like to have some company? Because you know how I am, I'll get the car and drive up there, let's see what you're doing. Show us what's successful there.
I think when we're talking about market rate housing, the need for market rate housing, we have to start talking about the need for senior citizen housing as a center city. Because sure, I know that I would love to live in senior housing in the center city, but I would damn if I'm moving out to Plains or St. James.
Aren't you living in senior housing right now?
Well, there's only 2 people. In my
So by definition.
But
I kind of have the same problem
you know, I
here.
think if we want to talk about market rate housing, we can talk about senior citizen housing right up front. And we have 3 big buildings that could, well, 2 until we change the law about the armory.
Well, that's gonna be a tough lift, and I'll explain that to you later when we talk about it, because I've looked at doing it. But I mean, there's things that we as a community could have done. For example, the Center Street School.
Yeah, well, you and I are great at the blame game of what everybody.
No, we're gonna blame each other.
Who was much stupider than we were way back then.
Who was that?
It's just not doing the same thing.
I can't remember that. But that building is still there, you know, and it could be repurposed for a whole lot of things. we've got a group of young people in our community right now that have taken on the old Chestnut Street School, 290 Chestnut. And they're converting that to market rate housing. Is that right?
Yeah.
And they're gonna have 10 to 13 units of market rate housing in that building when they're done.
That's great.
30 when they're really done.
Right, and they've got plans to expand to 2 additional buildings on the land that they acquired with the building.
Who's paying for it?
So there's
themselves,
it's private money.
That's great.
and we're talking young people. Yep. Under 40,
Right, so they might.
true
be
entrepreneurs that are
yeah.
local,
And true young people.
true young people.
So how do we entice them to move here
So-
and want to be here?
They're here, they're from Skenevis, but they've moved here.
Yeah.
And they already own homes. They don't rent to college students, they only rent to locals. That's their vision, that's what they want to do. That's what they're renting to for the Chestnut Street School remodel. As Ed mentioned, they're gonna put 2 more buildings up, but we need to incentivize them, and that's where the mayor's asked me to help do that. I've been finding tax incentives that were on the books, but unfortunately have been sunsetted through the Miller administration. Working with the mayor and the city attorney, we're going to be introducing them to the legislation committee at the next meeting. So the sunset clauses will be lifted. There's one right now for what Peter was talking about, and Joan, what you're talking about for first-time home buyers. We need to get back on the books, and that's 45-Q. And that unfortunately had some parameters put into it. I'm already working with Senator Oberacher's office to see what we can do to lift that. But I know a few of you know, but we, the city of Oneonta government cannot make any tax exemptions. We have to follow what the state has done. And so all of these laws that I've been going through are on the books for the city of Oneonta, and I'm looking at more. So in my spare time, that's what I'm doing.
But Lynch, there's other things the city could do. We could decide to give them a building permit instead of charging them for it.
Absolutely, but I can tell you that the young people, I just were at their job site today, and I wanted to commend Steve for his approach with them. He's been very approachable with them, and they're giving Steve high marks on that. But I think you're right. I want to make sure that we're working with our local contractors, our local developers, to make life easy. We're not here as government to be an obstacle for them. And I think Steve's office has been doing that, not being an obstacle, and we just gotta keep doing more and more of it, because we're not going to attract more local and young local. I mean, this is truly an anomaly right now. And I'm glad that our mayor has a favorable ear to this cause, and that market rate housing is one of his priorities, because we desperately need that. I know Joan knows that. Every real estate agent in Oneonta knows we need that.
There is an unprecedented shortage of inventory of housing for buyers as well as renters. So the market is there, and we need to reach the people that will be built, that are interested in building. So I think it starts with having the knowledge of where the land is to build. It can be apartment complexes, but it can also be infill housing. If there's a vacant residential parcel, there's no reason why we can't encourage somebody to build a house there.
Absolutely.
Well, we could reduce the lot size up on Suncrest Terrace and Crescent Terrace to half what it is now, so that there's lots of extra lots up there.
That's correct. We
Like
might get
more
some
single family
blowback.
houses. Huh?
So we might get some blowback, but right.
We might.
I said, let me this way here. Steve, when you get an opportunity, would you review the decrepit and vacant house list? It's been reported from anywhere from 40 to 70 houses in the city.
There's 70.
Sir,
It's approximately 70.
can you get us a list of where they are and the current ownership? Perfect. Thank you. Here, let's grab that list from them and circulate it to all the members.
Does anyone know the status of the Oneonta Hotel?
It's in foreclosure. You got 4 months before it gets auctioned.
I asked that question too.
Yeah, I mean, you've got, it's, the closest the receiver said is 4 months,
Right, that's optimistic.
right?
That's a tremendous opportunity.
It sure is.
Yeah.
It sure is.
We're gonna have to find somebody with deep pockets. I have some expertise in what it's gonna take to renovate that structure.
Is that dance hall still up on top?
Is the dance hall still?
There used to be a dance hall up on the top of the arena.
Right.
Big ballroom.
It's in 189.
You're over there.
That's correct. It's in the fifth
It's
floor.
still there?
It's right now the county IDA, it's Congressman Delgado's office.
Mhm.
No, we
The
got
hotel's
to
about 44 units out.
Hmm?
There's 44 apartments in the area.
All $112 million.
No, some of them are 2 and 3 bedrooms.
Okay.
So it's a mix, 1, 2, and 3.
You think
All
the
right, well-
estimate, you think the
Ma'am?
estimate is 12 million to renovate that
Well, I
fully?
think based on what I experienced next door at 189, which is basically the same building as they experienced a common facade. I know what it took to renovate that building in 1980. It hasn't gotten any cheaper. And the hotel is approximately 60% larger. All right, so if no one has anything else. We've given quite a bit of work, Carrie, to send out to all of us, and there'll be a lot of reading and things for us to do. Hopefully we'll all find time to do it. And if we feel like it's a need to meet in a workshop, we can arrange that and do it, so we can have those discussions. Any other questions, comments? Hearing none, I look for a motion to close the meeting. You got it. Any objections? By acclamation, thank you very much. I appreciate all your help.